Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're stepping back into a world where the air smells of wood smoke and rosemary, and death lingers just beyond every shuttered window. The year is somewhere between 1347 and 1351, and you're wandering the crooked lanes of a European village where the streets are muddy, the bells toll often, and nobody trusts a cough. You clutch a sprig of lavender like it's a holy relic, and every passerby eyes you with that, "Are you infected?" Squint. The plague. Yes, that plague is here, and you, poor traveler, are smack in the middle of it. Now let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. But that's okay, because tonight we're not here to panic. We're here to get curious, sleepy, and just a little absurd. You're going to follow the world's strangest medical professionals as they attempt to fight the Black Death with handfuls of herbs, masks shaped like birds, and enough superstitions to fuel 1,000 cozy nightmares. Hey, if you're loving this content, I'd really appreciate it if you could give the video a quick like and hit that subscribe button. And while you're here, drop your location and your local time in the comments. We love seeing how many of you are dozing off around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in the port city of Messina, Sicily. It's October 1347, and the wind off the sea brings more than just salted air. You smell it before you see it, an odd rank blend of mildew spices and something sourer. Ships from the east have arrived, and they're not just carrying silks and spices. On board are rats and fleas, and within those fleas, well, something very small, very mean, and very contagious. You stroll past the docks where a cargo net hangs, crooked, the wood creaks beneath sailors' boots, and there's shouting in a dozen languages. A merchant is coughing. Another man collapses by a crate of oranges. Someone nearby mutters a prayer, and someone else lights a bundle of herbs and waves it through the air. Historians still argue whether the disease arrived on that exact ship or a different one further north, but the result is the same. In the months to come, plague will sweep across the continent like spilled ink blotting out cities, towns, and villages. No one really knows what it is. Demons, bad air, divine punishment. Whatever it is, people are dying fast. Now, you dear wanderer are not one to sit around and wait for doom. So you do what anyone with a sense of adventure and minimal medical training might do. You start to follow the only people who seem to have a plan, the plague doctors. You spot your first one just outside the city wall. He's trudging along on heavy boots, wearing a dark robe, coated in waxed fabric gloves, a wide-brimmed hat, and most notably, a long curved mask shaped like a bird's beak. It's equal parts terrifying and weirdly theatrical. He pauses beside a farmhouse, peers through the shutters, and pulls out a leather pouch stuffed with dried herbs. You watch as he carefully sprinkles something into a pot of water left outside the door. You edge closer. The air around him smells like cloves and regret. It's here that your journey really begins. You decide to shadow this strange, silent figure. Each stop he makes is another house of sickness, another attempt to chase off death with bundles of basil, sage, and rue. He doesn't speak. but you learn from his actions. How he burns rosemary in clay bowls, ties marigold garlands over door handles, and murmurs prayers while dusting rose petals over fresh graves. You learn quickly that the plague doctor is both feared and revered. In some towns, he's welcomed like a priest. In others, he's stoned at the gates. People think he brings disease with him, or maybe he just follows it like a shadow. One night, while camped in an abandoned granary, you rifle through his satchel while he sleeps. Inside, dried mint leaves, cloves lavender sachets, and a few oddly shaped crystals. There's a page torn from a manuscript listing ingredients for a purifying vinegar of the 4 noble thieves. Scribbled in the margins are translations in 3 languages and a crude drawing of a flea being banished by a lemon. You start to carry your own pouch of herbs, a handful of thyme in one pocket, a clove between your teeth. You don't know if it helps, but it feels like doing something. You hear stories as you travel that in Paris, physicians burn juniper berries in city squares, that in Florence, monks rub garlic on their robes, that in rural England, children are made to wear tiny pouches of rue around their necks. You take notes. You don't know it yet, but this obsession with herbs will be your life for the next few months. Maybe longer. You will smell like a walking spice rack. You'll taste like vinegar. You'll believe at various points that basil is your savior and that marigolds can cure headaches and heartbreak. And as you walk beneath the smoke-streaked sky past shuttered homes and echoing church bells, the scent of dried flowers and burnt sage thicken your lungs. You wonder, is this how we fight death, with scent and ceremony? You don't have the answer yet, but you're going to keep walking. The wind shifts. It carries a tangle of scents, wood smoke, wet hay, and something unmistakably sharp and sweet. You know it by now, clove oil, rosemary, and whatever else your beaked friend has tucked into the lining of his mask. It's strange how familiar this all becomes. The more time you spend with him, the less his outfit seems like a costume and more like a second skin, one that smells like a particularly determined salad. Today, you walk into a town that's already halfway emptied. Shutters are closed, church bells are silent, and a red X has been smeared on more than one front door. The townspeople have grown wary of strangers, even ones carrying bundles of herbs. You spot a boy hiding behind a well, clutching a stick of burning sage in one hand and a charm of rosemary in the other. You wave. He doesn't wave back. The plague doctor trudges to the town square. You trail him like a tired duckling, still chewing cloves. He kneels by a small brazier, lighting it with flint and kindling, then begins to toss in handfuls of herbs from a leather pouch, rosemary, mint, lavender, and something woody that makes your eyes water. Smoke billows upward, drifting through the narrow lanes. This is air purification, 14th century style. People begin to peek from their windows. You're surprised to find how much attention this draws. In the absence of medical certainty, spectacle carries weight. The smoke ritual becomes a kind of performance, half pharmacy, half prayer. It's dramatic, fragrant, and deeply, deeply uncertain. Historians still argue whether these public fumigations had any real effect. Some say the burning herbs masked bad smells, which slightly improved morale. Others argue that in rare cases, the oils in certain herbs like rosemary or sage may have had mild antimicrobial properties. But mostly, it just made people feel like they were doing something. You help stir the herbs with a wooden ladle, watching the leaves blacken and curl. It's oddly soothing. Behind you, someone murmurs a thanks. Someone else leaves a small coin near your feet. Later, you enter a home where the entire family has fallen sick. The parents lie still beneath linens, and the children rest beside them, silent but breathing. The doctor moves quickly. He places sprigs of lavender near each pillow. Then from a hidden pocket, he pulls out a sachet filled with dried rose petals, hyssop, and chamomile. He tucks it beneath the youngest child's bed and lights a tiny lamp beside it. It's gentle, almost parental. You hadn't expected that from a man who looks like an angry bird. You crouch beside a small table covered in bottles. Most are unlabeled. Some have ancient wax seals. The colors inside range from dark amber to murky green. One smells like vinegar and crushed thyme, another like garlic and regret. You dip a cloth in one of the milder ones and help wipe the child's forehead. The mother stirs, groans. The doctor turns, pulls out a bundle of dried marjoram, and begins to crush it into her water. You think it might help. You hope. The next morning, she's still breathing. You leave behind a bundle of herbs as you go lavender, rosemary, and thyme, the holy trinity of plague-era hopefuls. It's raining as you walk out of town, your cloak damp and your boots filled with the squelching rhythm of travel. The road is lined with ditches overflowing with runoff and forgotten hopes. But up ahead is another village, another cloud of breath rising from under a wooden eave, another door painted with symbols that mean stay away. You knock anyway. The woman who answers has tear-streaked cheeks and a kitchen that smells faintly of juniper and fear. She invites you in wordlessly. There are children in the corner and a man in the bed groaning, his face pale and slick with sweat. You and the doctor go to work. The ritual is automatic now. Burn herbs, open windows, replace linens, leave a bowl of vinegar and mint by the bedside. Offer a chamomile infusion. Burn some dried sage in the hearth, just in case the ghosts need an exit. One of the children hands you a small bunch of herbs she's gathered herself. For Papa, she says. It's mostly dandelions, but it's the thought that counts. Later, while the doctor naps, you sit by the fire and study his collection. One small notebook, bound in goatskin, contains pages of cramped handwriting, recipes mostly, ratios of basil to garlic, sketches of leaves, a drawing of a flea that looks like it lost a fight with a quill. You can tell he's been doing this for years, maybe decades. One page catches your eye. Recipe of 4 thieves. The handwriting changes, like someone else wrote it. It lists vinegar, wormwood, sage cloves, and rue. Supposedly this blend protected grave robbers from catching the plague while looting corpses. No one knows if it worked or if they were just really lucky sociopaths with good immune systems. Historians still argue whether the story is truth folklore or one giant medieval marketing campaign. Either way, the recipe is everywhere. You've already tried it 3 times. It mostly tastes like spicy pain, Before bed, you fill your own pouch with herbs: lavender for peace, mint for clarity, sage for purification, and cloves, of course, for the nose, the taste and the illusion of control. You hang it near your head as you sleep. The scent is comforting. The world is still very sick. But you're learning. Morning light slips through the cracks in the shutters, casting stripes across the dusty floor. You wake to the same now familiar bouquet: lavender, clove, rosemary, and just a hint of damp linen. It's oddly comforting, like waking up inside a spice drawer. The plague doctor is already awake, crouched by a fire. He's rekindled with dried mint stems and bits of yew bark. You wonder if yew does anything useful. He hasn't said. He rarely does. Today's journey takes you through a stretch of countryside where the towns grow smaller and the fear grows larger. These hamlets haven't yet seen the full wave of sickness, but they've heard the rumors of dark sores, sudden death, and silent carts rolling through the night. They don't welcome visitors easily. At one cottage, the door opens only a crack. A wrinkled eye peers through. Are you bringing the sickness or the cure? You glance at the doctor. He's stuffing a bundle of fresh rosemary and sage into the crook of his belt like it's the most casual thing in the world. Both you reply, which is honestly fair. The woman lets you in. She's been treating her sick husband with crushed garlic poultices applied directly to the skin. His chest glistens with olive oil and the scent of 1,000 crushed cloves. You wince mostly for the garlic waste. That stuff isn't cheap. Garlic was widely believed to be a powerful curative, one of nature's most aggressive little bulbs. People wore it, boiled it, rubbed it on their temples, and even tucked it under their pillows. Historians suggest its reputation stemmed from its sharp, antimicrobial aroma. And while garlic does have some antibacterial properties, it likely didn't do much for the bubonic plague. But again, when your options are garlic or a prayer, you go with the one that stinks more confidently. The plague doctor leans in to examine the man. He opens his pouch and pulls out a roll of muslin cloth infused with a paste of crushed basil and vinegar. He applies it with surprising tenderness, pressing the cloth against the man's forehead, then his throat. You assist, handing over a vial of rose water and fanning the poor man with a stiff piece of parchment. The scent in the room now is eye-watering garlic and vinegar wrestling for dominance, but the patient breathes a little easier. Or maybe that's just the basil placebo talking. Later, you sit outside, knees aching, chewing on a bit of mint from your own stash. The woman comes out to thank you. She offers a gift, 3 bulbs of garlic and a hand-sewn sachet of thyme. It keeps the fever spirits away, she says, with absolute sincerity. You accept both with a nod and the solemnity of a true herb apprentice. The next town is a day's walk away. Along the path, you spot little bundles of dried herbs hanging from trees, offerings maybe, or warnings. One bunch is tied with red string and looks like it's mostly chamomile and marigold. Someone cared enough to put this together. You leave it untouched respectfully. By dusk, you reach a small village where the local apothecary is, how shall we put this, enthusiastically weird. He greets you at the door wearing 3 belts, all with pouches labeled in ink. This one's for sleeping, he says, jiggling a pouch that smells like poppy and wormwood. This one's for sweating, he adds, patting a pouch that smells like onion tea and despair. He invites you in, thrilled to meet a fellow herbal enthusiast. He shows you his collection: dried nettles, crushed fennel seed, and something called dragon balm, which you suspect is just cinnamon mixed with lies. The plague doctor, as always, says nothing, just studies the shelves like a priest in a chapel made of leaves. The apothecary insists on preparing a tea guaranteed to repel the plague. You sit politely as he brews it with thyme elderflower and a drop of goose fat for texture. You take a sip. It tastes like hot regret. Still, the apothecary's notes are fascinating. He's recorded dozens of folk remedies from travelers, some as far away as North Africa. You copy a few wormwood smoke to clear rooms, thyme oil mixed with goat's milk for skin sores, and a curious one involving basil. Leaf compresses soaked in honey and vinegar. You spend the night in the loft above his shop, curled in a nest of old grain sacks and herb bundles. The scent is overwhelming, but weirdly calming: basil and mint, clove and yarrow, and something else you can't place. You fall asleep to the sound of bubbling pots and the gentle clink of pestles on mortar. In the morning, the apothecary offers one last gift: a tiny jar labeled sleep powder. It's mostly crushed chamomile and lavender with a pinch of poppy. He winks. Use only when you're too scared to dream. You tuck it carefully into your pack. Outside, the plague doctor is already waiting. You join him, adjusting the weight of your herb pouch and stepping back onto the muddy road. You're beginning to understand something important. These herbs, these smells, they're more than medicine. They're memory, ritual, reassurance. You can't stop the plague, but maybe, just maybe, you can soften its edge. The road winds through open fields, now far from the clustered hum of towns. Wind pulls through the grass like the sigh of someone very old and very tired. You and the plague doctor walk in silence, boots squelching softly in last night's rain. Around your neck, the herb sachet swings gently: lavender, rosemary, thyme, and just a whisper of poppy. It doesn't keep you healthy, but it does make you feel like you're doing something. And sometimes that's enough. By midday, you come across a tiny hamlet nestled in a bend of the river. Chickens scatter underfoot. A child peers at you from behind a cart, clutching a bundle of dried marigolds. You smile. He runs. The usual reception. You're led eventually to the local healer, a wide-shouldered woman with sleeves rolled up and a permanent squint. She smells like onions and ash. You the Birdman? She asks the plague doctor. He nods. And you, she says, turning to you, apprentice spice rack. You give a polite nod. You're getting used to that title. She leads you into a cottage where a man lies feverish under furs. His eyes flutter skin pale and damp. The healer has already applied an onion poultice across his chest, layers of crushed pungent bulbs tied with linen strips. You catch your breath. The scent is intense. Onions, like garlic, were considered natural purifiers. Some believed they absorbed poison from the air. Others thought their sharp aroma chased away evil. Historians still argue whether onions had any antiseptic properties worth noting, But in plague medicine, belief mattered almost as much as biology. The doctor examines the man's pulse, well touches his wrist with a gloved hand, squints through the mask, and sighs. He gestures for a cloth, and you hand him one soaked in vinegar and sage. He dabs the man's forehead and looks toward the fireplace. The healer, reading his mind, tosses a handful of crushed basil and thyme onto the embers. The herbs sizzle, releasing steam that smells like a stew made by someone who forgot the meat. You open your pack and retrieve a small jar of powdered marigold rosemary and fennel, something you've begun calling the Hope Blend. You mix a pinch into the man's drinking water, trying not to spill. The healer raises an eyebrow. "You've got the touch," she says. "Not sure it works. But it's gentle. That's the word that sticks with you, gentle. So much of plague medicine was violent bloodletting, cauterizing amputation. But herbs were kinder, fragrant, familiar. You could find them in gardens, markets, kitchen corners. You could rub them on your skin or place them on the windowsill like a ward. They smelled like home, not horror. You sit with the man for a time. The healer tells stories of other remedies she's tried. Onion pastes with mustard seed, garlic infusions soaked in ale, vinegar compresses with mint and wild yarrow. "I don't know what works," she confesses, "but it feels better than waiting." You nod. You understand now. The herbs aren't a cure, they're a comfort, a ritual, a resistance. Outside, you find the child again. He's playing with a garland of marigolds, tying them onto a stick. You offer him a bundle of dried thyme. He sniffs it, then makes a face. "Smells like old soup. Good soup, you say." He shrugs. The plague doctor gestures for you to follow. The healer thanks you both with a basket of dried herbs, mint, basil, garlic, and something sharp and unfamiliar. You add it to your growing collection without question. It's becoming a habit now, taking a little from each place, building a library of scent and superstition. You pass a field of wild garlic on the way out of town. The plague doctor stops to collect a handful. He doesn't explain. He doesn't need to. You do the same, tucking the pungent leaves into your pouch. They'll dry soon enough. That night you sleep beneath the stars, wrapped in your cloak, the herb sachet pressed close to your face. You dream of fields blooming with basil, of windowsills lined with mint, of women whispering prayers over bundles of sage. No death, just scent. In the dream, the doctor speaks. He tells you that the herbs don't need to work. They only need to remind us that we tried, that we cared, that even as the world burned, we still bent to pick time from the earth. You wake to dew and bird song. The doctor is already up, boiling water over a small fire. You add a pinch of elderflower and sage to the pot. He nods. You drink in silence. There's another town ahead, and you've got onions. The sun creeps higher, warming the road ahead as you walk with the slow, steady rhythm of someone who knows too much and sleeps too little. The plague doctor. Ever the mystery leads the way with his usual gait, slightly hunched, ever cautious every footstep, deliberate like he's dancing with invisible fire. You're used to the silence by now. It's comforting. You focus instead on the small satchel of herbs slung over your shoulder. It's heavier today, stuffed with gifts from the healer garlic basil mint and a few sprigs of something she only called luck leaf. You suspect she made that name up on the spot. But honestly, if it works, you're not going to question it. By midday, you reach a crossroads, two signs both weather-worn. One points to a town with a name you recognize, from rumor-heavy death toll, mass graves, a monastery that tried and failed to seal itself off from the world. The other points to a smaller village nestled in the hills. You nudge the doctor toward the latter. He gives a tiny nod. When you arrive, the first thing you smell is basil. It's hanging from windows, stuffed in boots by doors, and tucked into pockets of aprons. The whole town smells like an herbalist's shop during a panic sale. You soon learn why the village midwife swears that sweet basil, when rubbed behind the ears and sprinkled into stew, can prevent plague. No one questions her. She's never lost a patient, not yet anyway. You're brought to her home, a warm little cottage that buzzes with activity. She's in the kitchen grinding herbs with a mortar shaped like a hollowed-out apple. "You're the masked man's shadow?" she asks, nodding toward the doctor. You nod. She hands you a steaming cloth and says, "Here, press this to your neck. Basil, lavender, and sage. Keeps the heat out." You do as you're told. It smells like a very anxious garden. Basil, as it turns out, was more than a pizza topping in medieval times. It symbolized protection, purification, even love. Some texts claimed it could draw out poisons or ease the swell of buboes. Historians still argue whether basil's antibacterial properties had any meaningful impact, but it was certainly used everywhere from Italy to Persia, usually in hope rather than science. You and the plague doctor assist with a sick child, feverish, but not yet covered in spots. The midwife mixes a brew of basil mint and elderflower, spooning it gently into the boy's mouth. Then she places crushed basil leaves between strips of cloth and wraps them around his feet. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. "Old family cure," she says. "Worked for my uncle. He was only mostly dead. The child sleeps." Later, you help her hang fresh bundles of basil in the corners of the house tied with red thread. "For the wind spirits," she explains. You're not sure if she's joking. She doesn't smile. Outside the village, priest offers a different opinion. "All these herbs are vanity," he mutters, watching you hang a sachet in the chapel. "It's prayer that protects us." You glance at the sachet. "Can't hurt to do both." He snorts, but lets you finish. By dusk, the doctor decides to stay the night. You help the midwife prepare her own blend of warding smoke, basil, rosemary, and dried lemon peel. The scent that fills the room is sharp citrusy and oddly hopeful. You talk with her long after the doctor has retreated into his silent solitude. She tells you stories of other herbs. She's tried mugwort for dreams, rue, for strength, and nettle boiled into tea when hope ran low. "I don't know what really helps," she admits, "but if it gives them comfort, I'll keep doing it." You understand that feeling. That night you sleep in the loft beneath a row of drying herbs that look like upside-down forests. Basil leaves rustle gently in the breeze. The sachet at your neck is warm from your skin. You dream of basil fields stretching to the horizon, of green leaves turning back black clouds, of sickness retreating before a tide of scent and care. In the dream, the plague doctor speaks again softly this time. He tells you basil is not a cure, but a promise that someone cared enough to try. You wake just before dawn, eyes dry, mind calm. The doctor is already by the fire, sipping something dark and herbal. You join him, add a pinch of basil to your own cup, and sit quietly. There's another village on the map, another place that needs smoke, steam, and small kindnesses. You pack your bag, you take extra basil. The morning air is thick with mist as you follow the plague doctor across a damp field, your boots leaving soft prints in the dew-soaked grass. The herb sachet at your side swings like a sleepy metronome, and the bitter aftertaste of basil tea still clings to your tongue. The scent of crushed mint from your pocket is the only thing keeping your eyes fully open. Today's town is rumored to be in denial. You've heard whispers from travelers. They've shut their gates, burned their records, even banned the word plague. You half expect to be turned away, but when you arrive, the gates are open, sort of. More like unguarded. You exchange a look with the doctor. He shrugs with his shoulders and steps inside. What you find is eerie. Everything looks normal, too normal. Laundry hangs from lines children play in the dirt, and someone's baking something that smells suspiciously like rosemary bread. There are herbs stuffed into every window and above every door, but no red crosses. No warnings, no mourning veils. You're not sure whether to feel hopeful or deeply suspicious. A man approaches, mid-30s, unshaven, sweating. Just a fever, he says before you ask. Not the sickness, definitely not that. Uh-huh. You follow him to his home. His wife lies in bed, skin-pale eyes sunken, breath labored. It's the plague, but no one says it. They call it the heat. They've hung rosemary and thyme bundles all over the room, and beside the bed sits a bowl of steaming water filled with sage and marjoram. Sage. Now there's an herb with a complicated legacy. Sage was sacred to many ancient cultures. Romans burned it in temples. Celts used it in rituals, and medieval healers believed it strengthened memory and warded off evil. Why should a man die while sage grows in his garden, said a medieval proverb. Historians still argue whether it had genuine medicinal value or was simply a particularly dramatic plant with excellent PR. You kneel by the woman, adding fresh sage to the steam bowl, letting the leaves soften and melt into the air. The scent is crisp, almost peppery, and somehow reassuring. The plague doctor watches her carefully, then begins to mix a paste sage leaves, crushed with vinegar rosemary, and a whisper of honey. He applies it to her chest, then to the soles of her feet. The husband winces. That won't make it worse, will it? Nothing you say could make it worse. Later, you help swap out the linens and refill the herbal steam. The children are kept outside, chewing bits of dried mint like gum. The town healer, a nervous man who smells like lemon balm and mild panic, tells you his strategy: treat everything like a fever. If you say it's plague, people lose hope. But if it's just fever, they drink the tea. You nod, you get it. Denial is another form of protection. You walk the streets after dark, noting the herbs people use: thyme in the water buckets, sage at the doorposts, lavender in the cribs. Everyone has their own blend. Some households use basil and garlic, others swear by rosemary and a few drops of vinegar in the corners of each room. One elderly woman offers you her secret recipe: sage and marjoram boiled with red wine and lemon zest. She calls it her sleepy courage brew. You try a sip. It's surprisingly pleasant and possibly alcoholic. You don't ask for details. You learn that this town relies on sage for nearly everything. There's a communal garden where villagers take clippings daily. They steep it into teas, crush it into poultices, even tie it into their hair. No one will admit what they're truly afraid of, but you see it in their eyes, the weight of fear wrapped in fragrant denial. Before dawn, the plague doctor writes a note. You glimpse it as he folds the page. Sage dependency, morale sustained, mortality rate unknown. You move on the next day, walking through morning fog that smells faintly of steam and herbs and hidden grief. In your pouch, you carry a new sachet, a gift from the town's midwife. Dried sage marjoram, a single rose petal. For memory, she said. You don't ask whose. As the sun rises behind you, the wind picks up, stirring the scent from your satchel. You breathe deep, letting the sage clear your lungs and your thoughts. The road ahead is long, but for now you feel steady. You press forward. The sun climbs higher as you leave the sage-scented town behind, and soon the open fields give way to dense forest. Pine needles crunch beneath your feet, and birdsong trickles down from the canopy above. The air smells earthy and sharp, a mix of bark-damp moss and the faint resinous perfume of pine sap. The plague doctor says nothing as usual, but you catch him pausing now and then to sniff the breeze. Eventually, you find the trail narrowing the trees, crowding closer until it opens suddenly onto a clearing. Nestled in the center is a solitary hut, its chimney puffing a slow ribbon of smoke into the sky. The moment you step closer, your nose catches a bitter, almost medicinal smell that sends your eyebrows up. Wormwood. The woman who opens the door wears a crown of herbs and the expression of someone who's been disappointed by far too many visitors. She looks you up and down. Birdman and apprentice, she mutters. Come to steal my herbs or my secrets. We'd settle for your advice, you reply, holding up a pouch of mint as an offering. She snatches it, sniffs it, and grunts. You found a forest herbalist. Her home is a treasure trove of dried plants and mysterious vials. Wormwood hangs in great curling bunches from the rafters. There's juniper in bowls by every window and a pot bubbling in the fireplace that smells like punishment with a hint of anise. Wormwood has a long and somewhat cranky history. Medieval texts recommended it for everything from indigestion to warding off evil spirits. During plague years, it was burned in homes and hospitals to cleanse the air. Historians still argue whether the plant's aromatic oils had any real effect on airborne illness or just covered up the smell of fear. You and the doctor settle in as the woman begins lecturing rapid fire, no breath. She talks of smoke as medicine, how wormwood smoke purifies, how it makes demons gag and fleas flee. how she once burned so much of it, her neighbor thought the forest was on fire. She teaches you her method: crush the wormwood finely, mix it with dried juniper and pine needles, add a dash of powdered clove, then set it on coals until the room clouds like a foggy battlefield. You try not to cough as she demonstrates. You help her prepare smoke bundles, long twists of dried plants tied with hemp string. She hands you a finished one, already dry and crumbly. Burn this outside a sick room, she says. Let it hiss and whisper. You pocket it carefully. The doctor watches, then pulls out a small jar of vinegar tincture. He drops in a pinch of wormwood and shakes it gently. The woman nods in approval. For rubbing, she says, or for drinking, but only if you're already tired of living. The three of you share a meal of root stew and bitter tea. The tea is made from wormwood and wild mint. It tastes like regret, but it warms your stomach. Later, she shows you her herb ledger, a thick hand-bound book filled with notes in a dozen hands. You glimpse strange recipes: acorn paste mixed with rue, honey infused with crushed bay leaves, wormwood oil rubbed behind the knees to confuse the plague. You copy some into your own notebook, pausing now and then to add your own thoughts. Bitter taste, pungent, smell oddly comforting in small doses. The forest darkens early under the dense canopy. You sleep on a bed of straw, your sachet of herbs tucked beneath your cheek. The scent is sharper now, full of pine and wormwood and old paper. You dream of smoke curling up through cracks in old beams of sickness, retreating from bitter scents of healers whispering prayers to flames. When you wake, the woman is already gone out, gathering yarrow by torchlight. You and the doctor pack quietly, leaving behind a small vial of mint oil and a few cloves in thanks. Before you go, you light one of the wormwood bundles outside her door. It smokes slowly, scenting the clearing with something ancient and strangely holy. You walk on through the forest, the scent trailing behind you like a spell. The trail from the wormwood woman's hut is soft beneath your feet, coated in pine needles and scattered petals. You walk in a silence so complete it feels padded. Only your breath steady now, scented faintly with mint and vinegar, and the gentle swish of the plague doctor's robes accompany you. The deeper into the forest you go, the clearer the air feels. Fresh, almost untouched, but not for long. By late morning, the road widens into a village square. It's eerily quiet. No children, no animals, just a single bell ringing at the chapel on the far side. You exchange a glance with the doctor. He nods once, and you step forward. This village is on the defensive. Every door is marked with sprigs of lavender bound with white ribbon. Windows are sealed with linen soaked in vinegar. The scent hits you immediately, lavender sharp and floral undercut by the sour sting of vinegar. It's not unpleasant, but it is thick, like the whole town is exhaling perfume laced with panic. Lavender has been used for centuries in everything from religious ceremonies to laundry soap. It's calming antiseptic, and at least to the medieval imagination, a mighty weapon against bad air. Monasteries grew it in their gardens, bathhouses used it in their oils, and during plagues, People stuffed it into masks, sleeves, and prayers. Historians still argue whether lavender's antimicrobial effects had any real impact on plague mortality, but no one disputes its psychological power. It made people feel safe, or at least cleaner. The local herbalist, a wiry man with trembling hands, meets you in the square. He smells like a sachet come to life. We use lavender in everything he says, eyes darting. Ointments, teas, steam bedding, even bake it in bread sometimes. Does it help, you ask? He shrugs. Can't hurt. You accompany him to the home of a patient, a young woman, perhaps 20, fevered and hallucinating. The room is filled with lavender under her bed, in her sheets hung from the ceiling beams. A bowl of hot water with lavender and thyme sits nearby, steaming gently. You crouch beside her, dabbing her forehead with a cloth soaked in lavender vinegar. She moans and mutters something about birds. The plague doctor listens, then pulls out a small sachet filled with dried lavender mint and rose petals. He tucks it beneath her pillow, then opens the windows slightly to let the air circulate. You're learning that even in times of crisis, airflow matters, especially when you're swimming in herbal steam. Outside, the villagers gather herbs in baskets and hang fresh bundles on every post. Children tie lavender to their dolls. You help the herbalist make more vinegar infusions, lavender, steeped in wine, then strained into clear bottles. It smells like spa day meets battlefield. One elderly woman insists on sharing her lavender wine cure. She pours you a tiny cup. It tastes floral and mildly terrible, but her face beams with such conviction that you nod and take another sip. You spend the evening teaching villagers how to twist lavender and thyme into simple garlands. It's busy work, but it calms the hands. One child weaves you a bracelet of lavender stems. You wear it, of course. That night, you and the doctor sleep in a barn loft. Below, a sick cow groans softly. Even the livestock have herbal sachets tied to their stalls. You lie back on the straw and breathe in the mingled scent of lavender and hay. It's soothing, light floral with just a whisper of something deeper. Maybe sadness, maybe hope. You dream of fields filled with purple flowers, of windows open to the breeze, of a world where lavender is enough to protect us. In the morning, the fevered girl is awake and sitting up, weak but smiling. Her mother cries and clutches your hand. It was the herbs, she says. You don't correct her. The plague doctor writes something in his notebook. Lavender heavy use, morale high, results inconclusive. But you both know something happened here, whether it was the herbs or the hope, you'll never be sure. Historians still argue the same point centuries later. You tuck a bundle of dried lavender into your pack, press your hand to your wrist, where the bracelet still rests, and step back onto the road. Ahead, more doors, more bundles, more breath held between possibilities. The lavender-scented memories linger as you leave the village behind your bracelet of stems still wrapped around your wrist, slightly wilted, but surprisingly resilient. The plague doctor walks ahead, his robes brushing the roadside grasses every step, as steady as the tick of an ancient clock. Today, the road leads to hills, not tall, but steep enough to make your legs ache, and your satchel of herbs feel unusually heavy. Every now and then, you pause to readjust it, careful not to crush the dried lavender or the sage gifted to you 3 villages ago. You've begun thinking of the herbs not as tools, but as stories, little vials of people's hope, fear, and very stubborn belief. Midway up the hill, you meet a rider on the road. His horse is lean, his face gaunt, and his expression tight with tension. Don't go to the village, he warns. It's bad there. They've sealed themselves in. You nod politely, then keep walking, because of course you're going. At the top of the hill, the village appears surrounded by a makeshift palisade of logs and old wagon parts. Red cloth hangs from the gates like a warning. But just as you start to wonder if you'll have to camp outside, a young girl opens a small side door and beckons you in. Inside, it's chaos wrapped in calm. The villagers move in practiced silence, many of them masked with cloth or leather veils. You notice a pattern. Every house has a pot simmering at the hearth. Some with mint, others with lemon peel, or even eucalyptus imported perhaps by a desperate trader. The air is thick with competing aromas, none unpleasant, but all laced with anxiety. Your first patient here is a man coughing so hard his ribs shake. The plague doctor approaches and with unusual speed prepares an herbal steam mint thyme and crushed bay leaves. You hold the cloth tented over the bowl, helping trap the vapors as the man leans in. He breathes deep coughs, harder, then slumps back exhausted, but a little calmer. Mint has a cooling, clarifying effect. In modern terms, it's rich in menthol, which opens airways and soothes inflammation. But back in your time, plague time, it was prized for its strength of scent, its cleansing nature, and its ability to cut through the mental fog of sickness. Historians still argue whether the steam therapies of the era did anything but relax the dying. But they did relax the dying, and that counts for something. You're invited into a small herbalist's home. She's barely older than you, fingers stained green from constant preparation. Her specialty is mint in all its forms, dried, powdered, steeped, even candied. She gives you a tin of mint sugar lozenges and says, "For breath and for breath between tears." You nod, placing it gently in your pouch beside a bundle of sage and a folded square of linen soaked in mint vinegar. The herbalist shares her recipe for plague tea: peppermint, lemon balm, fennel seed, and just a pinch of licorice root. You sip some with her and immediately feel both comforted and slightly alarmed by how strong it is. It knocks people out, she admits. Sometimes that's the only way to get them through the night. She invites you to help her prepare a batch of infused ointment and thyme soaked in warm olive oil for chest rubs. You stir the pot, watching the green deepen in the heat, the leaves swirling like tiny dancers. When it's ready, she pours the oil into small jars sealed with wax. For the ones who are too scared to sleep, she says. That night you go house to house with the doctor, delivering the jars, checking pulses, adjusting herb bundles. You place mint leaves in shoes, tuck sachets into pillows, and even pin a sprig to one child's teddy bear. You're not sure it helps, but the mother cries and mouths, "Thank you." Outside, the sky turns lavender, not the flower, The color, soft and quiet, like the pause between heartbeats. You rest in the attic of the herbalist's house, wrapped in a blanket that smells like mint and old wool. You tuck a few fresh leaves into your collar and close your eyes. Your dreams are green, not the bright green of summer, but the cool silvery green of mint leaves in shade. You walk through a forest of it. The air is light. You feel clean. In the morning, a message is waiting. Another town, another outbreak. You pack your things, slipping the mint lozenges into your coat and tighten your belt. You feel ready. You're not, but you go anyway, because that's what you do. The path winds down from the hills in long, lazy curves, and the earth beneath your boots feels warm despite the morning chill. The plague doctor moves with his usual eerie grace, and you, with your now nearly encyclopedic pouch of herbs, follow in lockstep. Every bend in the trail brings a new scent: wild fennel, crushed nettle, distant smoke. You're beginning to think you could navigate by smell alone. By mid-afternoon, you reach a river town built low and sprawling with wooden bridges crisscrossing the water like ribbons. It looks quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't trust visitors. But someone must have seen your arrival, because by the time you cross the third bridge, an old man with eyebrows like broom bristles emerges from a door and waves you in. "My daughter's burning up," he says simply. The priest says to pray. "I want to try something that smells like it might work." That might be the best endorsement of herbal medicine you've heard yet. You follow him into a small, tidy home that smells of smoke and old apples. In the corner lies a girl no older than 12, cheeks flushed, breath shallow. Her mother sits beside her, fanning gently with a piece of parchment. The plague doctor kneels, takes the girl's wrist, and nods once. You're already unpacking herbs. From your satchel, you pull the old favorite trio mint rosemary thyme. But today, you decide to try something new, something you've been reading about in your notes. Yarrow. You crumble the dried leaves between your fingers, their scent grassy and slightly bitter. Yarrow has a reputation even this far back in time. Used by soldiers on battlefields to stop bleeding, praised by healers for treating fevers, sometimes slipped into tea to cool the blood. Historians still argue whether yarrow's reputation was based on actual effect or just centuries of repetition, but you're not here to argue. You're here to try. You boil water with rosemary and yarrow, adding just a touch of fennel seed for sweetness. You let it steep, watching the steam rise in gentle tendrils. When it's ready, you soak a linen cloth in the brew and place it gently on the girl's forehead. Her skin twitches at the temperature change, but she doesn't resist. Next, you prepare a drink, a mild tea made with yarrow, a few mint leaves, and honey, just enough to coax it past fever-parched lips. Her mother feeds it to her slowly, one small spoonful at a time. The girl's breathing steadies. Her cheeks are still too warm, but not so fiery now. You move to her feet and rub a light rosemary oil into the soles, more for comfort than cure. It's something you've seen the doctor do, and it feels human. Grounded, the family watches you like you're working magic. You don't feel like a magician, but you keep going. You notice the windows are shut, the air heavy. You open them slightly, just a crack, then light a dish of rosemary and thyme and place it by the door. The smell swirls slowly through the room. Clean, familiar. The doctor finally stands, gives the smallest nod, and moves toward the door. As you pack your herbs, the father grips your shoulder. If she lives, he says, I'll plant a garden of those leaves. You smile, plant them anyway. Outside, other villagers gather. Some just watch, some whisper. A few ask for your tea recipe. You write it down on scraps of parchment, drawing little leaves to indicate which herb is which. One man promises to boil yarrow every day until this devil's fog clears. You rest that night in a storehouse near the docks, surrounded by crates of dried fish and barrels of vinegar. The smell isn't ideal, but you sleep anyway, cradling your pouch of herbs like a talisman. Your dreams drift in yarrow fields. Wind stirs the tall stalks. Insects buzz lazily. Somewhere, the girl breathes easier. When you wake, the sun is warm and golden on the walls. A knock at the door. It's the girl's mother. She's better. She says, eyes shining. She's still weak, but she asked for breakfast. You hand her a fresh bundle of herbs. Yarrow, mint, and rosemary. Brew this once a day, you tell her, and plant some by the door. She nods, holding the bundle close. You walk away feeling lighter. The plague doctor doesn't say a word. He doesn't have to. The herbs aren't a cure, but sometimes they are enough. The river recedes behind you, its lazy current fading to a murmur as the town shrinks into memory. The plague doctor walks as if the road never ends, as if the land itself unfolds for him alone. You match his stride now, without thinking, part habit, part ritual. The pouch of herbs at your hip swings rhythmically, the yarrow within still warm from yesterday's healing. Your path takes you into flatter country. The grass grows taller here, yellowing at the tips, and the wind carries dust and scent in equal parts. You catch traces of dill, maybe marjoram. The air is quieter too, less bird song, more stillness. The kind of quiet that warns of something waiting. You reach a village whose name is not spoken, only gestured to. The people here don't say plague. They call it the gray weight. And you feel it in the way no one meets your eyes, in how the children play in silence, and in how even the animals seem to move more slowly. You're taken to a man lying on a pallet in a shed behind a bakery. His face is flushed, his breathing sharp. The baker's wife is there, wringing her hands beside a bowl of wilted greens that you suspect were once meant to be medicinal. You crouch beside her, offering a quiet smile. She tells you what she used: crushed basil, lavender, and the rue. You blink. Rue. She nods and gestures to a small plant in a pot on the windowsill. Bitter-smelling, narrow-leaved, and unmistakably rue. She's been brewing it in tea and sprinkling it at the door. Rue has an ancient reputation as both medicine and curse. Romans used it to protect against evil eye illnesses. Medieval monks planted it along monastery walls. Healers steeped it for fevers, headaches, and even plague breath. Historians still argue whether rue's bitterness helped or harmed. Some suggest it irritated the skin and lungs when overused, while others praise it as a purifier, in reasonable doses. You sniff the pot. It smells like strong tea and stronger suspicion. Still, you try. You prepare a cloth soaked in lavender vinegar and press it to the man's chest. You brew a fresh tea of rue mint and rose hips mild enough to soothe, but strong enough to convince. The man sips slowly, eyes fluttering. The plague doctor watches, then adds a drop of clove oil to a linen square and tucks it beneath the man's pillow. The scent layers in the room, mint over rue clove, over vinegar lavender, drifting like a veil. You notice something curious. The baker's wife has rue tied around her wrist. A simple band of it, wrapped 3 times. You ask her why. It's what my grandmother did, she says. When the fever came, she said it kept her walking. It's not a scientific answer, but it's an honest one. You help her prepare a salve next rue, and sage steeped in warm oil mixed with a touch of beeswax to thicken. You apply it gently to the man's temples and wrists. He doesn't stir, but his breathing evens slightly. Outside, the townspeople begin to notice. They see the doctor and his silent shadow moving from home to home, leaving bundles of mint and rue behind, offering tea, adjusting door sachets. Soon they begin to imitate you. You catch children hanging their own bundles, parents boiling their own rue, scenting the air with bitter determination. The fear doesn't vanish, but it transforms. That night, you and the doctor sleep in the bakery loft above sacks of flour and herbs drying on string. You tuck a sprig of rue under your pillow, not because you think it will save you, but because it reminds you that someone somewhere once believed it would. Your dreams are peculiar. You walk through a town made entirely of herbs. The streets are lined with lavender. The roofs are mossy basil, and the wind is made of rue, sharp and strange but purposeful. You wake to morning bread baking below, and the smell of yeast mingling with clove. The man in the shed, still alive, still sleeping, but his color has returned, and the cough has slowed. The baker's wife thanks you with a warm roll and a fresh bundle of rue. It's bitter, she says, but it's ours. You pack your herbs, add the new rue to your collection, and step onto the road again. The plague is not gone, but neither are you. The bitter scent of rue lingers in your pouch as you leave the bakery town behind the herb's edge, cutting through the early mist like a forgotten warning. You glance at the plague doctor, who moves as always, calm, deliberate, silent. You wonder what he thinks of rue. You wonder if he thinks about any of the herbs at all, or if he just carries them out of duty like ritual armor stitched from someone else's hopes. The road turns rocky as you climb a low ridge, feet slipping on gravel dust. At the top, you see your next destination, nestled in a shallow valley. It's larger than the last few towns, with steep-roofed homes and a small market square. Banners of faded cloth hang limp in the breeze, and you can just make out the sound of hammering, someone building something or boarding something shut. You cross the threshold and notice the change instantly. No greetings, no stares, no shouting, just soft murmurs, quick glances, and every house bearing a new symbol, an eye painted in white chalk surrounded by a ring of green. You ask a woman tending a herb cart what it means. Protection, she whispers, against the unseen, against what comes in silence, and then she hands you a pouch of saffron. You blink. Saffron, that's rare. She nods. Expensive, too, but it's worth more than silver if it keeps my children safe. Saffron, the golden thread of ancient remedies, the stigmas of a crocus flower, painstakingly gathered, dried, and sold at prices high enough to make even noblemen hesitate. Used in cooking dyes and, yes, medicine. It was believed to warm the blood, lift the spirits, and strengthen the heart. Some thought it could sweeten the humors. Historians still argue whether saffron truly helped the sick or just symbolized purity through its color and rarity. In this town, saffron is worshipped. You follow its trail from home to home. Saffron water splashed over doorsteps, threads of it steeped in wine, yellow dyed cloth wrapped around wrists and ankles. In one house, a woman weeps as she sprinkles saffron over her husband's pillow. It helps him dream, she says, even when the dreams hurt. You and the plague doctor are led to the home of a weaver whose fever has burned for 3 days. The air inside smells rich and earthy saffron and wool and sweat. You check his pulse, weak but steady. You prepare a tea with care, saffron honey, and a touch of lemon peel. It's shockingly beautiful sunlight in a cup. You tilt the spoon to his lips. He drinks with effort. Beside him sits a bowl of saffron oil warming by the fire. You dip your fingers gently, anoint his temples, the soles of his feet. The plague doctor adds lavender to the hearth's smoke, layering scent upon scent, golden over floral. You notice the weaver's hands, even in fever, still calloused, still strong, still stained yellow from the threads he dyed just last week. You sleep that night in the weaver's workshop, among looms and baskets of fabric tinted with saffron indigo and madder root. The scent of dyed silk mixes with vinegar from your travel pouch, creating something that almost smells like memory. In your dreams you weave, not cloth but light, threads of saffron and mint basil and rue, each one pulled from the air, knotted into stories that hang in the sky like banners. You wake to silence, then a soft knock. The weaver's wife. His fever broke, she says. He's resting. He asked for more of the tea. You give her your last saffron thread. She wraps it in silk and holds it like a blessing. Before you leave, she hands you something folded in cloth. Inside a piece of dyed fabric, bright yellow, with tiny embroidered herbs along the edges. For your pouch, she says, to remind you what hope looks like. You tuck it beside your other treasures and step out into the morning, the fabric warming against your hip. Saffron might not be magic, but sometimes gold doesn't need to shine to be precious. You leave the saffron town under a sky that's the same shade as their dyed cloth, pale gold, a color that somehow feels like both dawn and dust. The plague doctor walks a step ahead, his silhouette sharp against the morning haze, and your satchel is heavier now, not just with herbs, but with what they've come to mean. You keep thinking about the weaver, how his wife touched your hand like you'd handed her sunlight, how the tea you brewed shimmered like something sacred, how the scent of saffron, warm and foreign, clung to your skin longer than fear ever did. The next village you reach is barely there. Just a cluster of cottages, a well, and a chapel that looks like it might crumble if someone sneezes near it. But even here, herbs are fighting to grow. Little bundles of marigold hang from door frames, and someone's laid a circle of dried thyme around the well. You recognize the work of desperation. You're greeted by a small crowd, silent and solemn, who lead you straight to their chapel. Inside, the priest lies on a cot near the altar, shivering under too many blankets. His breath rasps in shallow bursts, his lips tinged with purple. You can smell the fever. You kneel beside him, checking his pulse, noting the sweat that clings to every line in his face. His assistant, a young boy with calloused hands and anxious eyes, hands you a cloth steeped in wine. He says it must be blessed, the boy whispers. But he can't hold the cup. You nod, take the cloth, and reach for your herbs. You're nearly out of saffron, so you choose something else. Frankincense and myrrh. The air in the chapel already carries the faint echo of these resins. Their use here is older than the sickness, older than the town. Burned in rituals, offered in sacrifice, treasured as gifts for kings and gods. And in times like these, believed to purify the air and please divine forces. Historians still argue whether these ancient substances truly had antiseptic qualities, but their symbolic weight was enormous. You crumble a small piece of myrrh into the oil lamp by the priest's bed. The flame flutters, then steadies, sending out a curl of thick, sweet smoke. You mix frankincense with a few drops of rosemary and apply it gently to the priest's wrists and neck. The scent is warm, earthy, deep, and somehow eternal. The plague doctor does not interfere. He simply watches. You prepare a tea of myrrh, lemon balm, and a touch of cinnamon bark, strong, spicy, a little wild. You use only a few sips, touching the priest's lips with a spoon, his throat twitching in response. Around you, the chapel is so quiet, you can hear the flame crackle. Later, the boy shows you a wooden box tucked in the altar, bundles of herbs, folded linens, even a tiny pot of saffron someone must have saved from the market long ago. He's been guarding these things like relics. You nod in approval. You spend the afternoon teaching him how to burn herbs without smothering the flame, how to steep teas that won't scald the tongue, how to listen to breathing, not just hear it, but listen. He watches you closely, soaking up everything like a dry sponge in holy water. By nightfall, the priest is no worse, maybe even a little better. The boy lights a new oil lamp. Should I burn more frankincense, he asks. You nod and add a little thyme for the soul. He doesn't laugh. He just does it. You sleep in a side room of the chapel, curled beneath a woolen blanket that smells like old cedar. Your satchel rests beside you, the embroidered saffron cloth now covering the pouch like a wrap. You breathe deeply, frankincense, thyme, rosemary, and let it anchor you. Your dream is of cathedrals with herb-filled domes. Each prayer, a puff of clove smoke. Each window edged in lavender. You wake to the boy at your side. He's still sleeping, he whispers, but his color is better. He asked for more tea. You hand him the recipe, then the herbs, then impulsively your last bit of frankincense. He holds it with reverence. As you leave, the priest stirs. He opens his eyes, finds yours, and nods just once. That's enough. Outside, the sun has crested over the ridge, lighting up the time ring around the well. It glows pale green in the dawn. You turn back one last time. The boy is standing at the chapel door, clutching the pouch of herbs to his chest. You walk on, one foot in front of the other, one herb at a time. You walk on under a sky that's trying to be blue, but can't quite shake the gray. The road narrows again, then opens into pasture land, where sheep drift like clouds across the earth. The scent of animals mingles with the herbs tucked into your satchel, thyme, rue, saffron, and now frankincense, faint traces of every place you've been. The plague doctor says nothing, but you catch him glancing at you more than usual. Maybe he's starting to see you not as a shadow, but a fellow practitioner, or maybe he's just trying to guess how you still smell faintly, like holy fire and roasted lamb. The next village sits on the edge of a marsh. Fog drapes itself over the rooftops, and the reeds whisper secrets as you pass. You hear frogs, distant bells, and one unnervingly cheerful whistle echoing from somewhere unseen. A group of women meets you near the well. One of them holds a broom made of bundled reeds. Another clutches a string of amulets. You'll want to see the midwife, the eldest says. She's sick, and if she goes... They don't finish the sentence. They don't have to. The midwife lives in a squat house lined with moss and driftwood. You enter quietly. The air inside is damp, thick, and oddly fragrant, like boiled roots and wet stone. The woman lies curled under a quilt, her breathing shallow. Her apprentice kneels nearby, fanning the air with a frond of fern. She's said to use the old method, the girl whispers, the one with the apple. You raise an eyebrow. The girl pulls an apple from a bowl. It's not rotten, but it's not fresh either. Then she takes a knife and slices it clean in half. You rub it on the boils, she says. Then you bury it at the crossroads. She swears it draws the sickness away. Ah, yes, the apple cure. You've read about it in the weirder manuscripts. Folk wisdom said apples especially, when sliced and exposed to sick flesh, could absorb disease like a sponge. Burying the apple was said to seal the illness into the ground. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic magical or just early composting. You decide to play along, but gently. You accept the apple, rub it on the woman's neck, hands, and soles of her feet, where the skin is dry and cracked from days of fever. Then, at the apprentice's urging, you wrap it in linen, tie it with red thread, and hand it over. She dashes outside to find the nearest crossroads. Ritual complete. Now for the practical part. You steep a tea of dried basil, rosemary, and marjoram herbs, known for calming the body, steadying the breath. You add just a touch of elderflower and lemon peel to bring down the fever. It smells like a spring garden caught in a storm. The plague doctor, meanwhile, burns dried juniper branches in the hearth. Smoke curls lazily toward the rafters, sharp and woody. You waft it gently toward the woman's face. She stirs, coughing once, then sinks deeper into her sleep. Her pulse steadies. Later, you help the apprentice prepare a herbal wash thyme and mint, boiled in vinegar and cooled over the windowsill. You wipe down the walls, the bedposts, the windows. It's both ritual and hygiene. You've learned how often they blend. You sleep on the floor that night, wrapped in a blanket that smells like every herbal cupboard you've ever opened. Outside, frogs sing and the fog thickens. Your dreams are strange. You're in a garden that grows only apples. You pluck one slice, it open, and instead of seeds, you find rosemary thyme and a tiny paper scroll that reads, "You did what you could." In the morning, the apprentice is waiting. Her fever's dropped, she says. She asked for soup and something sweet. You offer her a mint lozenge from your pouch. Sweet enough? The girl smiles for the first time. Before you leave, she presses a green apple into your hand. Not for healing, she says. Just so you remember us. You tuck it carefully into your satchel. As you step back onto the road, the pudul lifts slightly. A breeze stirs the reeds. Somewhere behind you, the apple is already buried at a crossroads, taking who knows what with it. You glance at the doctor. He nods once slowly. You walk on. The apple weighs lightly in your satchel, not heavy, not burdensome, just quietly present. Like a story you're still deciding whether to tell. You move through the morning mist, beside the plague doctor, your steps falling in with his as easily as breathing. The road is muddy from last night's rain, but not impassable. The herbs you carry are wrapped tightly in cloth, protected from the wet. Basil, sage, rue, saffron, yarrow, even the last curled edge of mint you've been saving for someone who really needs it. And today, someone just might. The next village doesn't appear so much as emerge, a cluster of stone cottages rising out of the fog like forgotten thoughts. There are no guards, no watchers, just one elderly man sitting on a bench with a hawk perched on his shoulder. He doesn't greet you, just nods toward a building on the far edge of the square. They're inside, he says, all three of them. You don't need to ask who. Inside you find a family, a father, a mother, and a boy of perhaps 9. The parents lie in opposite corners of the room, both feverish. The child sits cross-legged between them, unmoving, a sprig of something green clutched in his hand. You recognize it, Angelica. Of course. Angelica was a revered herb in plague times. Often called the root of the Holy Ghost, it was believed to protect against poison, plague, and even witches. Some carried it in pouches. Others chewed it raw. Monasteries grew it behind stone walls, and herbalists praised its bittersweet bite. Historians still argue whether Angelica had real antiviral properties, but its symbolic power was undeniable. Angelica was not just medicine, it was a prayer. You kneel by the boy. He doesn't flinch, just looks at you with tired, too old eyes. I gave it to them, he says, holding up the limp sprig. It's all I had left. You gently ease the Angelica from his fingers and replace it with your last piece of mint. He sniffs it, then closes his hand around it. You begin the work. For the father, a cloth soaked in Angelica root tea and laid across the chest. For the mother, a mixture of sage, lavender, and honey applied to the temples, then wrapped in warm linen. The doctor opens a pouch and adds a small pinch of dried Angelica to a bowl of burning coals. The scent is spicy, sharp, slightly musky. It curls through the room like whispered Latin. You prepare a second batch of tea, Angelica root fennel seed, a shaving of dried orange peel, and a drop of honey. You press it to the parent's lips one at a time. The boy watches solemn still. Later, the doctor places 2 small sachets beneath each pillow, one of angelica and rue, the other lavender and mint. You place one beside the boy's sleeping mat, too, tucking it under with care. Night falls. You sleep against the wall, candlelight dancing across the rafters. You dream of wings. Angelica leaves turn to feathers, and roots that stretch deep into the earth, anchoring memories where plague cannot reach. In the dream, someone says not every cure needs to be believed to work. Some just need to be given with care. You wake before dawn. The boy is awake too. He looks at his parents, then at you. They're still breathing, he says softly. You sit beside him and offer half a dried fig from your pouch. He takes it, chews quietly, then asks Will. They get better. You don't answer. You just reach into your satchel and pull out your own angelica sprig, the one you'd saved since the river town. You tie it gently to the window latch where the morning light can touch it. For strength, you say. Before you leave, you write the recipe on a piece of parchment and give it to the boy. If they wake up, you tell him make the tea again, and maybe keep some mint nearby. He nods like someone accepting a mission. As you and the doctor step back into the fog, the hawkman watches you pass. He says nothing, but his hawk lets out a low cry as if marking the moment. You don't look back. You walk forward, the scent of angelica clinging to your sleeves, bitter and blessed. The fog trails behind you like a memory you can't quite shake, and the air shifts from wet to crisp as you climb into higher ground. You notice it first in the scent, less moss, more pine, less decay, more frost. The plague doctor walks ahead, unmoved, while your satchel bounces against your hip, now heavy with parchment notes and angelica-scented cloth. You're halfway to the next village when you catch wind of something different. A sharp, spicy fragrance that stirs something deeper than recognition. You know the smell, vaguely one that tickles the back of your nose and makes your eyes feel like they might water from memory alone. Cinnamon. It feels almost extravagant out here, like someone misplaced a market stall from a distant city. When you reach the village, the source becomes clear in the square. There's a long clay stove. On top of it simmers a thick reddish liquid in a copper pot. A woman stands beside it, slowly stirring, and every few minutes she tosses in a pinch of what can only be cinnamon bark. You approach. She glances up. "Plague doctor," she asks. Then seeing you and his nose, you nod. She dips a ladle, pours out a small ceramic cup, and hands it to you. It's sweet, spiced, soothing, and deeply strange. "You'll want to talk to the apothecary," she says. "He's the one behind all the cinnamon business." She leads you to a tidy stone house near the edge of the square. Inside, you find jars, dozens of them, lined neatly on shelves, each one labeled in a tidy, looping hand. Cinnamon bark, clove buds, crushed fennel, dried orange peel, even something labeled dragon spice, which turns out to be just nutmeg and ego. The apothecary, a slender man with more enthusiasm than eyebrows, greets you like an old friend. Finally, he says, someone who'll appreciate what I'm trying to do. He explains his theory that cinnamon, among other spices, warms, the blood sweetens the air, and reminds the body of its will to live. He admits none of this is proven, but then he adds with a wink what is cinnamon was imported from far-off lands at great cost, prized for its scent taste and supposed healing powers. In plague times, it was often reserved for the wealthy. Ground into tonics, steeped into teas, even burned in sacred rites. Historians still argue whether its use was medicinal or simply psychological, but there's no doubt it made the sick feel special. You help the apothecary prepare a new batch of what he calls plague, cordial, a mix of cinnamon, clove, vinegar, and just a whisper of honey. It smells divine. You bottle it in small flasks, corking them with cloth soaked in rosemary oil. Later, you and the plague doctor distribute them to the homes of the sick. At one such home, you find a girl coughing violently, her lips' chapped breath shallow. Her mother weeps softly, pressing linen to her forehead. You offer a spoonful of the cordial. The girl swallows grimaces and then sighs a small dry sound, but less painful than before. The doctor adds a sachet of cinnamon and thyme to her pillow. You lay a damp cloth steeped in mint and clove across her brow. By now, you know the rhythm of this work. That night you sit with the apothecary by candlelight, sipping the cordial yourself. It warms you from the inside, more than tea, more than fire. It's like swallowing a memory of safer days. You ask him why he uses cinnamon in everything. Because it's beautiful, he says without irony. Because it tells people they matter even now. You nod. You understand. Your dreams are fragrant. You walk through halls of cinnamon bark and clove the walls lined with spice jars that hum softly as you pass. You reach out and touch one. It opens. Inside, not powder, but a tiny flame. You wake to that same warmth still in your chest. The sick girl is better, her breathing easier. Her mother thanks you with a small pastry baked with cinnamon. It crumbles in your hand. You savor it. Before you leave, the apothecary hands you a jar. Take it, he says. The good stuff, for when it's darkest. You wrap it carefully, wedge it between rue and angelica, and shoulder your satchel again. The plague doctor waits at the edge of the village, unmoving. You join him, and together you walk on smelling faintly of courage and cinnamon. You carry the cinnamon jar like it might break, not because it's fragile, but because it feels sacred. The warmth it gave you last night still lingers like an ember beneath your ribs, and in a world ruled by chill winds and cold stares, that's not nothing. The landscape shifts again. Trees grow thinner, the wind sharper. You see fewer villages out here, just scattered farms, clustered sheep, the occasional smoke thread curling from a chimney. This part of the country feels like it's holding its breath. You match its pace. As you near the next settlement, you notice something unusual: bundles of herbs nailed to trees. Not just one or two, but dozens. Sage, mostly. Twisted tight, with red string, and affixed at eye level like sentries. A man with gray-streaked hair and a feathered cap meets you at the edge of the field. You're late, he says. You glance at the plague doctor. He doesn't react. The man leads you into a village, arranged in a circle like a clock frozen at the wrong hour. At the center stands a tall post wound with vines and sage garlands. Around it, people sitting silent, each clutching a small bundle of herbs in their lap. They call themselves the Watchers. You're ushered to their healer, a woman with dark eyes and a voice like carved wood. "We don't treat the sick," she says. "We prevent." She gestures to a stone house on the edge of town. "That's where we keep our mixtures, sage-based. Everything is sage-based, and she means it. Sage soap, sage-infused oils, dried sage in the chimneys, hung over beds crumbled into floorboards. It's a wonder they haven't started eating it. Oh wait, they have. You're handed a sage biscuit before you've even sat down. Sage has long been known as the herb of salvation. In Latin, salvia, to heal. Ancient texts called it a panacea. Romans believed it improved memory, soothed throats, and expelled evil spirits. During the plague years, it was a favorite among healers. Historians still argue whether its benefits were actual or aspirational. But here it's doctrine. You're allowed it into their mixture room. It smells like 1,000 grandmothers' kitchens and a battlefield chapel all at once. Dried sage hangs in every direction. There are mortars worn smooth from use, jars filled with powder oil, even pastes. You watch as the healer grinds sage with garlic, adds a splash of vinegar, and stirs in ash from last night's fire. "We smear this on windowsills," she says. Keeps the sickness outside. You help her prepare a batch. The smell is bracing, like someone turned anxiety into an air freshener, but when you test it on your hand, it warms, not stings. The plague doctor observes, then contributes his own idea sage and rosemary oil heated together and rubbed on the soles of the feet. You'd call it eccentric if it didn't work so often. Later, a boy is brought to the healer, sniffling feverish, but still alert. You prepare a mild tea, sage chamomile, and a pinch of mint. It smells gentle. It tastes like patience. You sit beside him, holding his hand as he sips. "Why sage?" he asks. You think for a moment. "Because it remembers for us," you say. And sometimes we forget to heal. That night, the town holds a vigil. No fire, just smoke. Dozens of bundles burned low in clay bowls, the air heavy with curling tendrils of sage. You sit among them, eyes stinging slightly, heart quiet. Your dreams are gray and green, a labyrinth of hedges made entirely of sage. You wander it without fear. At the center, the boy smiling, holding a cup of tea. "Still warm," he says. In the morning, the fever's broken. The healer allows herself a smile. She gives you a gift, a wand of braided sage rosemary and dried pine needles. "Burn it when you can't think," she says, or when you think too much. You wrap it in the embroidered saffron cloth and slide it gently into your pouch. The plague doctor is already waiting at the path's edge. You join him. Together you walk on. And behind you, the village exhales. The sage smoke follows you like a memory clinging to your cloak, even as the wind changes and the land flattens into wide open fields. The plague doctor moves without pause, his boots thudding softly against dirt paths worn smooth by fear. You carry your satchel close now, a patchwork of smells and stories: cinnamon, rue, angelica, saffron sage, a portable history of hope. The next village announces itself not with smoke or silence, but with music, a flute, reedy and thin, playing a tune that dances on the wind, like something trying very hard not to cry. You follow it. It leads you into a place that looks more like a gathering than a settlement. Tents and carts are arranged in loose spirals, woven mats cover the ground, and strings of dried fruit and herbs sway in the breeze. Children dart between them, their laughter soft but real. This is not a permanent village. It's a caravan stopped in motion. A woman greets you with a curt nod. "We've lost 3, she says, and 2 more cough in their sleep. You'll help or you'll move along. Fair enough." She brings you to a tent near the outer ring where a boy no older than 10 lies bundled in layered quilts. His lips are dry, his cheeks too red. A fever burns beneath the surface like a hidden coal. The smell in the tent is sharp, almost sour. You spot dried herbs hanging above the doorway, clove mostly, and a few strands of fennel seed tied in little bunches. Ah, fennel. Fennel was a favorite among folk healers, for centuries used to ease digestion, reduce fever, freshen breath, and ward off disease. Some believed it cleared evil spirits from the chest. Others just liked the taste. It was steeped in wine chewed raw and crushed into salves. Historians still argue whether its reputation came from effect or accessibility. It grew easily, smelled strong, and made people feel cleaner. Sometimes that was enough. You ask the woman if you can borrow her mortar and pestle. "Don't break it," she says. "It's older than I am." You begin your work. A tea, first fennel seed, mint lemon balm, and a shaving of cinnamon bark from your precious jar. You steep it in hot water while the plague doctor checks the boy's pulse and lays cool cloths on his wrists. When the tea's ready, you feed it to the boy in slow spoonfuls. His eyes flutter. He sighs. You grind more fennel into a fine powder and mix it with clove oil and honey to make a paste. You apply it lightly to the boy's chest, fragrant, warm, slightly sticky. His mother watches silent. Later, you sit outside by the fire with the caravan healer, a young man with bright eyes and hands that never stop moving. He offers you roasted fennel seeds wrapped in paper. "We chew them after meals," he says, "for health. And so we don't all smell like goats." You laugh and he grins. He teaches you how they bind fennel stalks with rosemary and bay to hang over sleeping mats. 3 herbs. 3 wishes, he says. 1 for strength, 1 for peace, 1 for the road. You spend the rest of the evening preparing bundles for the sick. Fennel, rosemary, and mint, this time tied tightly with braided string and dusted with a pinch of sage ash. That night, the flute plays again. You lie beneath the stars, the herb bundle tucked beneath your head like a pillow. You dream of winding paths that smell like licorice and pine, of caravans that move like songs, of children waking slowly, blinking at dawn. In the morning, the boy is better, not cured, but breathing easier, smiling, eating. His mother places a handful of roasted fennel seeds in your hand. "Take them," she says, "for the next one." You do, and then she leans in and ties a new string around your satchel, red, yellow, and green. For the journey, she says, you bow deeply as the caravan prepares to move. The plague doctor is already walking. You catch up easily. The road ahead waits, and you carry Fennel now too. The road feels longer today, less a stretch of earth beneath your feet, and more like a thread tying one worry to the next. The plague doctor moves quietly beside you, his mask catching the sun just enough to look like it might blink. Your satchel swings heavier now, full not only of herbs, but of people. Not their bodies, thankfully, but their gifts, their fears, their recipes scrawled on scraps of parchment and folded into corners like pressed flowers. And now Fennel joins the mix. The land flattens as you descend into a low valley where mist clings stubbornly to the ground and the grass crunches with frost, though the sun is up. This village is different, bigger. Stone walls, 2 wells, even a watchtower. There's organization here which by plague standards is practically nobility. You're met at the gate by a man in a thick wool cloak and boots polished like mirrors. We've established zones, he says crisply. You're only allowed in the green zone. The plague doctor says nothing, which given the usual is quite a rebuttal. Eventually, you're let in. You're escorted to the infirmary, a long, low building at the edge of the village, with a thatched roof and surprisingly clean windows. Inside, the smell hits you like a wall, herbs, vinegar, fear, and something faintly metallic. This is where you meet the herbal coordinator, a tall woman with streaks of silver in her braid and ink on her fingertips. We're using hyssop now, she says without preamble. Steam, rinses, room purification. You blink. Hyssop, she nods. Old church records say it was holy and cleansing, and besides, we're out of lavender. Hyssop. Mentioned in the Bible, revered by monks, waved over doors, and whispered through prayers, hyssop was believed to purify spaces, cleanse illness, and guard the soul. It was steeped, burned, scattered, even chewed. Historians still argue whether hyssop had any true antiseptic value, or was simply adopted for its strong symbolism and sharper scent. The woman shows you their method. In the back of the infirmary, a boiling pot sends hyssop steam into the air. The smell is clean minty, almost grassy, like if rosemary had a sharper, younger cousin. Every hour, someone adds fresh sprigs. Every surface is wiped with hyssop vinegar. Every doorway is framed by bundles of dried stems knotted with white cord. You're invited to assist with a patient, an elderly man, barely conscious, breath rattling in his chest. You prepare a warm compress of hyssop and sage soaked in vinegar, then wrap it gently around his chest. He murmurs something too soft to catch. Later, you craft a mouth rinse, hyssop, fennel seed, mint, and salt strained carefully and cooled. You hold the cup to the man's lips. He doesn't wake, but his mouth moves slightly, as if trying to say thank you in his sleep. The coordinator shares their notes. We've tried every herb we can grow or steal, she says. Sometimes they help. Sometimes they just help us stay busy. You nod. You understand. You offer your cinnamon cordial. She raises an eyebrow, then smiles. That'll lift someone's heart, she says, even if it's only for an hour. That night you're allowed to sleep in the infirmary loft, where dried hyssop bundles hang like chandeliers. The scent lulls you sharp, steady, forgiving. You dream of ancient temples, long hallways lit by herbs, burning in sacred bowls. You carry a torch made of hyssop, and behind you plague recedes like a shadow fleeing the light. You wake to quiet. The man is still alive, breathing more easily now. The coordinator gives you a nod, and in thanks hands you a fresh hyssop bundle wrapped in linen. This one, she says, was grown with prayers. You place it in your satchel beside the sage braid and the embroidered cloth. The plague doctor is waiting outside, silhouetted against a sky turning gold. You step into place beside him. One step, one breath, one herb closer. The air outside the walled village is cleaner, colder, and feels oddly empty after the structured hum of the infirmary. You walk in silence beside the plague doctor, whose long robe stirs the roadside leaves in soft whispers. Your satchel brushes against your hip, heavy with hyssop sage fennel, and that unspoken weight, all the almosts and maybes that come with healing in a world that doesn't want to be healed. The land stretches wide now. You pass through meadows, dotted with broken stone fences, and the occasional wild goat that looks at you with better judgment than most people. You arrive at the edge of a cluster of homes that feel too small to be a village, maybe a settlement, maybe a family that simply grew sideways. But something about the place draws your attention, specifically the rooftops. They're green, not moss mint, bundles of it growing from small clay pots balanced along rafters and chimneys, windblown and fragrant. The whole place smells fresh, which is an unsettling word to use during a plague. A boy greets you barefoot and red-cheeked. You're the mask man, he says, pointing at the doctor, and the herb person. You smile. You've been called worse. He leads you to his grandmother, who reclines in a rocking chair, knitting with fingers so gnarled they could probably shape stone. We've done well so far, she says, but the cough is circling. We're using mint, chewed, steeped, burnt, bathed in it. You nod. Of course they are. Mint has always been one of the most generous herbs, easy to grow, quick to spread, and sharp enough to awaken even the dullest senses. Used for breath digestion, fevers, headaches, and during plagues, almost everything. People crushed it into floors, hung it over beds, stirred it into wine. Historians still argue whether mint had real curative properties or was simply the most aromatic placebo in European gardens. You set to work. You prepare a mint compress for the youngest child who has begun coughing. Mint and yarrow leaves soaked in cool water and wrapped gently around the throat. The girl giggles, it tickles. That's a good sign. The grandmother shows you her mint stew, a thin broth with wild onion salt and handfuls of bruised mint leaves. You try a spoonful. It tastes like spring fighting for relevance. The plague doctor, meanwhile, walks through each home in the cluster, placing bundles of mint tied with red thread on lintels and cribs, and unusually beneath beds. He burns dried mint leaves over an iron pan, letting the smoke drift low, settling over the floor, like it's tucking the house in for the night. As dusk falls, the family gathers in the largest home. You brew a tea, mint chamomile, and lemon balm for everyone. Children sip it with pinkies out pretending they're royalty. One boy offers you a handful of dried mint wrapped in a leaf. For your bag, he says. It's from the roof. You tuck it in beside the saffron cloth and the braided sage. You sleep outside that night under an overhang beside the goats. The scent of mint is everywhere on your hands, your blanket, even your dreams. In them, you're walking through a garden where the paths are mint leaves, soft and cool beneath your feet. You kneel beside a bed of clover, and the ground exhales fresh, clean kind. When you wake, the girl's cough is gone. The grandmother is brewing stew, and the rooftop mint is catching sunlight like sails. The family offers you a bundle as you leave mint rosemary and laughter tied with twine. You join the plague doctor at the edge of the field. He gives one nod, and you fall into step. Your satchel swings gently. You smell like clarity. The fields fall behind you in waves of green and gold, and with every step, the wind carries less mint and more dust. The plague doctor walks as always, silent, steady, as if the path is just a moving shadow beneath him. Your own footsteps are heavier now, not with fatigue, but with thought, with the scent of crushed herbs lingering on your palms, with names you'll never learn, and faces that fade, but never quite vanish. The road narrows, and soon you're climbing again, stone by stone, into a rugged hillside that wraps itself in mist like an old woman's shawl. From above, a bell tolls not for mass, not for mourning, but rhythmically, measured, almost like time. You arrive at a cliffside settlement carved quite literally into the mountain. Homes built into stone, gardens in hanging baskets, children scrawling chalk prayers onto the rocks. A monastery bell chimes again as you're led to a wide, low building that smells like lemon pine and old ink. Here, in this monastery turned hospice, you're introduced to an herbalist who bows deeper than anyone else you've met. You've come for the Arabic leaves, she says. You blink. The what? She lifts a small satchel. Inside are neatly wrapped bundles labeled in both Latin and Arabic calligraphy. Dried herbs you've never seen, or at least never identified this way. You recognize one by scent alone. Fenugreek. Fenugreek is one of those herbs that slips through borders unnoticed, born in the East, welcomed in the West. Used in everything from spice mixes to ancient medicine cabinets, praised for boosting appetite, easing fever, softening inflammation. During the plagues, it came west, with travelers and traders, its strange maple syrup scent making it unforgettable. Historians still debate whether it actually helped or just added flavor to despair. The herbalist smiles. We use it in compresses and porridge, and in poultices for the lungs. You get to work alongside her. She shows you how to boil fenugreek seeds until they soften into a paste which you blend with honey and a touch of rosemary. The smell is earthy and oddly warm. You apply it to cloth and wrap the chest of a man coughing so hard he startles himself awake. His eyes flutter open. He whispers spice and tries to laugh. You help prepare meals, 2 light stews with fenugreek, garlic, and nettle. The monastery takes feeding as seriously as praying, and both you suspect are part of the treatment. Later, you prepare a steam bath with the herbalist fenugreek thyme eucalyptus, and a sliver of myrrh. The steam fills the small stone chamber, curling like incense, like blessing. You help the young ones breathe it in. They emerge pink-faced and sleepy. That evening, you sit in the monastery courtyard, the sun setting behind a veil of lavender cloud. The bell rings once more, and the herbalist hands you a page, torn from an old medical text. Latin on one side, Arabic on the other. You're carrying pieces of everywhere, she says. You should carry this too. You fold it carefully, slip it into your satchel. That night you sleep in a stone alcove with a bundle of warm herbs under your head. You dream of distant markets of hands grinding seeds of spices passed down through languages older than borders. When you wake, the man with the cough is still alive and snoring like a bear. Before you leave, the herbalist tucks a small pouch of fenugreek into your cloak. For when your voice goes thin, she says, boil it and remember the warmth. You nod, you thank her. And as the bell tolls one last time, behind you, you descend the mountain path with the plague doctor, the cliffs echoing softly with your steps. Your breath smells faintly of fenugreek, and you walk like someone who knows they're not walking alone. The mountain gives way to lowlands once more, and your boots remember how to sink into mud. The fenugreek pouch, tucked in your cloak, shifts slightly, with each step giving off a faint aroma, sweet, nutty, oddly calming. You roll a seed between your fingers as you walk, the plague doctor always just ahead, always just silent. By midday, the land flattens into a great plain, dotted with orchards, mostly dormant, with a few stubborn trees clinging to late fruit. You pass rows of gnarled trunks wrapped in cloth charms and sprigs of rosemary. The smell of apples, rot, and vinegar carries on the breeze. A boy on horseback greets you. We need you at the orchard house, he says. My mother's sick. She won't eat. He leads you through rows of fruit trees to a farmhouse soaked in afternoon light. Inside, the air is heavy, like cider left too long. A woman lies on a straw-stuffed mattress, unmoving, but breathing shallowly. Her skin glistens with fever, and her hands tremble under the covers. The boy's sister sits beside her, holding a bowl of what looks like mashed pears steeped in herbs. She used to make this for us, she says. Now she won't touch it. You lean closer, and the smell hits you familiar, fragrant and forgotten. Bay leaves, a sprig sits in the bowl still green, despite the heat. The scent weaves through the fruit like something ancient and enduring. Bay leaves used for centuries to crown victors' flavor stews and guard the sick. In plague times, they were burned, boiled, steeped, and scattered. People placed them in shoes, crushed them into poultices, even wore them in wreaths. They were believed to bring clarity, protection, and purification. Historians still argue whether bay's volatile oils actually killed germs or just gave the illusion of control. Either way, it stuck. You set to work. You prepare a fresh tonic bay leaf, fennel, a splash of apple vinegar, and just a touch of mint. You strain it carefully and spoon a bit into the woman's mouth. She stirs, doesn't flinch, swallows. That's something. You then crush bay leaves with a few grains of salt and oil, making a paste. You rub it gently into her wrists and ankles where the heat pulses hardest. The room fills with a sharper, greener scent. Now less cider, more focus. The plague doctor watches, then takes 3 bay leaves from your satchel and arranges them on the windowsill, facing out. A quiet barrier. Outside, the boy's father is boiling bay leaves in a copper pot over a fire. She always said the leaves remembered, he murmurs, remembered her, the land, the air. You kneel and help. You add thyme, a splash of lemon water, and a few rosemary needles. He stirs it slowly, like it might answer him. That night, you sleep in the loft above the barn, surrounded by sacks of dried fruit and baskets of harvested herbs. You wrap yourself in a blanket that smells of hay and old cider. A single bay leaf rests beneath your pillow. In your dream, you walk a hallway lined with trees, not wood, but leaves growing inward from the walls. Bay sage, mint angelica. You follow their scent like breadcrumbs until you reach a door made of smoke. You step through. You wake to quiet movement. The woman is sipping tea. Her daughter is smiling and crying all at once. The boy offers you a small sack. Bay leaves, he says. Dried last spring. Mom said to always keep some warm. You nod. Place the bag carefully inside your satchel next to the saffron cloth and the braided sage. The pouch grows heavier, but not burdensome, just full. You walk back through the orchard as the sun rises behind the trees. Every branch holds something fruit leaf wind. The plague doctor waits at the edge of the grove, mask still robe fluttering faintly in the breeze. You join him, and together you step into the next story, bay scented and brave. The orchard fades behind you, its bay scented breeze slipping away with the morning haze. The road ahead is sun dappled, flanked by low hedgerows and the occasional thistle daring to bloom. Your satchel presses against your hip, heavier now, yes, but it doesn't feel like weight. It feels like momentum, like every herb, every pouch, every handwritten recipe stitched together to keep you walking. The plague doctor hums. Wait. No, not hums. But the wind catches in his beak mask in such a way today that it sounds like music. Hollow, almost mournful. You don't mention it. You just walk with it. By midday, you reach a small village tucked against a river bend. Homes built from pale stone white curtains fluttering from windows, and a smell that stops you mid-step. Not sweet, not sharp, just bitter. An old man meets you at the well, holding a bundle of leaves that look as though they've given up trying to look friendly. They say you carry herbs, he rasps. We've got one that bites back. You follow him to a kitchen where a girl, perhaps 15, lies sweating in a corner, curled into herself like someone trying to remember how to be smaller than pain. Her grandmother sits beside her, fanning gently, holding a wooden bowl of something thick and greenish gold. She offers it to you. Tansy, she says. Ah, tansy. You've read about it, sometimes praised, sometimes feared. Tansy was used in plague years to drive out worms, purify blood, and ward off evil humors. But it was also dangerously strong bitter to the point of poison in the wrong hands. People wore it in their shoes, rubbed it on their skin, made infusions with trembling fingers and prayers. Historians still argue whether Tansy saved lives or quietly shortened them with its fierce oils. You take a cautious sniff. It smells like dandelions that lost their sense of humor. She took it last night, the grandmother says. A little, just a little, now she's sweating everything out. You crouch beside the girl. Her breathing is rough but steady. The plague doctor examines her, then gives you a look. Watch closely. You stay by her side and prepare something gentler, a tea of lemon balm chamomile and just a whisper of mint. No Tansy this time. You help her sip slowly. She grimaces, but swallows. Outside, the old man is drying tansy bundles in the sun. We've always used it, he says, but we never liked it. It's like fighting fire with a hotter fire. You help him crush dried tansy into powder to be used sparingly only for external applications, only on feet and wrists. You dilute it with bay oil and apply a small amount to a linen cloth, which you tie to the girl's ankle like a bitter little charm. Later, you burn a bit in a bowl, letting the smoke drift toward the ceiling. It smells like hay after lightning. It curls around the beams like it's warning the dust to behave. That night, you sleep in the loft of a cider house above barrels marked with chalk symbols and bundles of drying tansy. You keep your window cracked. You don't want too much of that bitterness following you into sleep. You dream of balance, of scales made of sage stems, of bay leaves and tansy laid on opposite sides, of hands yours measuring caution in spoonfuls. When you wake, the girl is sitting up, sipping broth. Her grandmother hugs you without asking. You let her. Before you leave, the old man hands you a tightly wound bundle of tansy. Use it only when everything else whispers, he says. This one shouts. You tie it with a bit of red twine and slip it carefully into your satchel away from the softer herbs. The plague doctor is already moving. Of course, you follow. The bitterness trails behind you, but so does the girl's voice calling after you. Thank you. It doesn't hurt so much now. You walk through the rising light with turmeric still in your nostrils, the scent of warmth and intention clinging to your sleeves. It's different from other herbs, less perfumed, more primal. As though it doesn't ask for permission to heal, it simply does what it came to do. Your satchel feels fuller, now layered, not just with ingredients, but philosophies. Rue for reverence, cinnamon for courage, turmeric for the strength you don't have until you do. The landscape turns sandy, and the soil thins beneath your feet. The wind carries grit and memory. The plague doctor is unfazed. His steps never falter, and you've long since stopped wondering where he gets his strength. You're just trying to walk like he does, like someone who knows the end, but still shows up anyway. You reach a fishing village that smells not of death, but of brine and resin. Boats bob in the harbor sails, tied in neat spirals. Nets hang drying on long wooden racks, but there's something else hanging beside them, bundles of pine resin and cedar shavings. The village elder greets you leaning on a staff that looks like it was carved by the tide itself. We burn the trees, he says, because they burned with us first. He brings you to the center of the village, where a large cauldron bubbles with a thick, dark mixture, cedar pine resin and seawater. The air around it smells wild, sweet, sharp, and ancient. Not clean, not medicinal, but something more primal, like fire wrapped in bark. Pine resin has a history older than medicine itself. Ancient people used it to seal wounds, fill cracks, embalm the dead, and summon gods. During plague times, it was burned as incense, smeared on skin mixed with wine, and turned into salves. Its sticky strength was seen as a barrier, a way to coat the body and soul in something the plague couldn't penetrate. Historians still argue whether it killed bacteria or just smelled like it could. You watch as the villagers coat door frames with the pine cedar mixture. Some dab it behind their ears, others rub it into their boots. The children carry twigs dipped in resin like talismans. The elder takes you to a hut near the water where a woman lies, wrapped in cedar smoke-stained blankets. Her breath is shallow, her brow slick with sweat. The plague doctor moves quietly, places his gloved hand on her chest, then nods to you. You brew a cedar tea, carefully steeping shavings in hot water alongside fennel and mint to balance the bitterness. You spoon it to her lips, and though her face tightens at the taste, she swallows. Next, you prepare a resin-rubbed pine, mixed with rosemary oil and a little beeswax. You warm it over coals until it softens, then massage it gently into her hands, her feet, her chest. She sighs once, then sleeps. You learn the village rhythm: burn at dawn, apply at dusk. Keep the windows open, the chimneys smoking the children close. You help them mix fresh cedar wash for the floors and strain pine vinegar to soak their nets. It keeps the rot off, one fisherman says. The wood and the body. That night you sleep in a cabin with nets for walls and the steady hum of ocean wind. A bundle of pine resin rests under your bed. Your dreams are deep forest dark of branches, cracking of sap running like gold, of a fire that doesn't destroy, but purifies. In the morning, the woman sits up, breathing easier. Her husband cries in silence, one hand gripping yours, the other holding a pine twig worn smooth from prayer. You're handed a pouch of soft resin wrapped in fish skin for when everything feels like splinters, the elder says. This will remind you that even broken trees still heal. You slide the pouch into your satchel beside the bay leaf charm and turmeric root. The texture is sticky, but comforting. The plague doctor stands already on the pier, looking east. You fall in beside him. The wind shifts, and the trees, even from a distance, seem to bow in gratitude. You follow the coastline inland again, your boots tracing the divide between salt and soil. The resin scent still clings to your skin, and there's a sticky patch on your cloak where the fish skin pouch of pine has leaked just slightly. You don't mind. It smells like memory sealed in bark, like protection that doesn't ask for proof. The plague doctor leads you inland through a field of wildflowers left to their own opinions. The blooms sway gently, yellow and white and violet, with petals too bright for a world like this. But maybe that's the point. You arrive at a scattered hamlet with narrow stone paths and herb gardens built into windowsills. Bees hum in lazy loops, and the air smells light, sun-warmed linen and lemon balm. A woman in a blue apron greets you, wiping her hands on her skirt. "We've been lucky," she says, "but luck fades. We'd like to be ready." She leads you to the small room behind her home where a girl lies curled on a straw pallet. Fevered, yes, but not yet breaking. Her breath is shallow, but her fingers twitch with tension. You know this type of sickness. It's not just physical, it's fear wrapped tight around the lungs. You open your satchel, and there it is, lemon balm. Lemon balm, or Melissa officinalis, has always been the gentle one, used since ancient Greece to calm nerves, soothe sleepless minds, and draw smiles back to grieving mouths. In plague times, it was brewed into teas, pressed into oils, tucked into letters, and burned in corners of sick rooms to ease the dying or the watching. Historians agree it rarely cured, but it comforted. And sometimes that's more powerful than any cure. You prepare a tea first, lemon balm, chamomile mint, and a sliver of orange peel. The scent is citrusy and soft, like someone whispering a joke in a quiet library. You press the warm cup to the girl's lips. Her eyes flutter. She drinks. You steep more, for the family this house believes in communal sipping. The mother takes her cup with trembling hands. "She hasn't slept in 2 days," she says. "Neither have we." You prepare a balm next lemon balm, infused in olive oil with just a breath of lavender and rosemary. You rub it gently into the girl's wrists and temples. Her muscles ease, her mouth softens, her hand finds yours. The plague doctor adds a sprig of balm beneath her pillow and places a second sprig in the window, pointed outward. You've seen him do this before. You still don't know why, but you trust it matters. Later, the villagers gather around a fire to boil lemon balm in great steaming kettles. They make sachets, hanging them from beams and lintels. Children wear them as necklaces, laughing like they're at a festival instead of a vigil. You smile. You help tie them. That night you sleep in the same room as the girl, just in case. The lemon balm bundle under your pillow sends you into the softest sleep you've had in weeks. You dream of meadows where the air hums with bees and children nap on blankets of herbs, where no one is afraid to laugh, where the sickness has no name and doesn't need one. You wake to the girl sitting upright, holding a cup of tea. Her mother is asleep on the floor, beside her, finally at rest. She whispers, "It doesn't hurt to breathe today." Before you go, the woman in the blue apron hands you a scroll tied with lemon balm stalks. "It's nothing," she says. "Just some poems we copied from the church. For peace, for sleep." You slide it carefully into your satchel beside the turmeric root and pine pouch. The plague doctor is already moving his silhouette, slicing the morning like an old signature. You follow. The road ahead is quiet, but now you know. Not every battle must be loud. You leave the balm-soaked village behind as dawn filters through a sky brushed with lavender and pale gold. The poem scroll rustles softly in your satchel, tucked beside resin roots, ribbons, and all the memories no one else will carry. You adjust the strap, not because it's heavy, because you want to be sure it's still there. The plague doctor's boots make a sound like rhythm against the gravel road. He walks with purpose, though you suspect he doesn't always know where he's going, only that he must go. You walk beside him, because, well, you must too. The path leads into woodlands, where trees grow in tight, whispering groups. The air is cooler here, shaded, and holds the scent of moss and wet bark. But beneath it, faint, almost hiding another smell, crisp, bitter, citrus-like. You follow it to a clearing where a woman tends to a garden ringed by stones. Her hands are stained orange. We use the bitter ones, she says, offering you a bowl of withered green leaves for the ones who linger in fever too long, and the ones who forget they're still fighting. She's talking about wormwood. Ah, yes, the dramatic cousin of every gentle tea herb you've ever met. Wormwood, Artemisia absinthium, is as old as healing itself. Used to purge, to stir, to burn through disease, like a fire through underbrush. During plague times, it was boiled into strong tonics, burned in censers, or crushed into poultices for sore limbs and sour breath. Some said it drove away spirits. Others said it drove away your lunch. Historians still argue whether it healed or just shocked the body into pretending it had. You examine the garden. She's grown other artemisias too, mugwort, southernwood, even a little white sage. But it's the wormwood that dominates the air, its bitter scent like a challenge issued to anything unwell. A boy lies in a hut nearby, skin pale and soaked in sweat. He mutters nonsense in sleep. He's been like that 3 days, the woman says. We gave him the sweet herbs first. Now it's time for the bitter. You nod. Begin the brew. Wormwood mint to soften it, and a touch of honey to lie to the taste buds. You steep it longer than usual. Let the bitterness seep through the water until it changes color. You press the cup to the boy's lips. His throat twitches. He swallows, then winces, then swallows again. Later, you prepare a cloth soaked in wormwood tea to press against his temples. It smells like regret, but cooler. The plague doctor lights a cone of dried wormwood. At the threshold, smoke curls like warning. It bites the air, but the hut feels cleaner somehow. That evening, the woman teaches you how to make plague wine, wormwood infused in red wine, aged for days in sealed jars. Only a sip, she warns, unless you enjoy hallucinating your ancestors yelling at you. You sip, just a little. It tastes like metal and dreams. That night you sleep under the stars beside the garden. You dream of silver leaves of bitterness that teaches of hands pressing warm tea to cold lips. You wake to birdsong and to the boy sitting upright, eating a piece of flatbread with great ceremony. He cursed at me when I gave him tea, the woman says, smiling. I nearly cried from joy. Before you leave, she gives you a tiny jar sealed with wax. Wormwood and vinegar, she says. For when sweetness isn't enough, you tuck it into your satchel. It smells through the seal. Of course it does. The plague doctor waits by the edge of the forest. You catch up. Your breath carries mint and wormwood now. Not pleasant, but strong. The forest parts slowly, reluctantly, as though it's reluctant to let you leave. The smell of wormwood clings to your sleeves, sharp and green, like you've been dipped in bitterness and asked to walk it off. But you don't mind. Some journeys need bitterness to finish what sweetness could only start. The plague doctor's silhouette moves ahead of you, steady as ever, and you fall into pace. Each step now feels less like travel and more like weaving a stitch through land and time, threaded by herbs and the hands that offered them. You arrive in a town half forgotten by the map pressed against the bend of a crumbling riverbank. Its buildings sag a little as if exhaling. You're welcomed not with words, but with open doors and the quiet sound of mortars grinding. Inside one of the homes, you're brought to a man lying motionless beneath linen soaked in steam. Beside him, two young women press herbs into a boiling pot with practiced rhythm. "What are you using?" you ask. They answer in unison, "Borage." You blink. Not a usual plague herb, but now that they say it, you smell it. Cucumber and green stems, something faintly like honey, clinging beneath the fresh. Borage, the bright-flowered plant of medieval courage. Warriors drank borage wine before battle. Lovers sent borage bouquets as tokens of bravery. Herbalists praised its use for fevers, grief, even exhaustion. During plagues, it was used more rarely, perhaps because it grew slower, or perhaps because courage was harder to bottle than balm. Historians still argue whether borage had physical merit or just gave the sick permission to hope again. You prepare a tea. Borage leaves bowl steeped with fennel and chamomile, a soft blend, not to shock the body, but to coax it. The man doesn't resist the cup. He drinks slowly. His breathing evens slightly, like his chest remembers it's allowed to relax. Later, you help make borage compresses, cool cloths soaked in leaf infusion to draw the heat. One girl ties a garland of borage blossoms and sets it by the window. For the sun, she says, so it remembers us. The plague doctor burns a pinch of crushed borage leaf in a bowl with lavender and cedar shavings. It doesn't smell strong, but it smells kind. The family sits with you into the evening. One daughter hums as she peels an apple. The other sews sachets of dried borage with tiny red stitches at the corners. For courage, she says, handing you one. Tuck it where you'll forget about it. Then remember it when you need it most. You nod. You tuck it into the lining of your satchel behind the bay leaf beside the scroll of lemon balm poems. It hums there quietly, even without sound. That night, you sleep on the floor near the hearth. It's not cold. You wake once to add more wood to the fire, and again when the man mumbles something in his sleep. It's not a prayer, not a request. It's thank you. In the morning, the daughters pour you a cup of borage wine, sweetened slightly light on the tongue. For the road, they say, and the burden. Before you leave, they press a fresh bunch of borage flowers into your hands. You smell them. You feel braver for it. Outside, the town is stirring gently, doors creaking open, pans clinking, the faint scent of herbs in the chimneys. The plague doctor is already at the riverbend mask, angled toward the wind. You step beside him. This close to the end, the air feels heavier. But so do your shoulders, and they've never been straighter. The final stretch comes not with fanfare, but with stillness. No bird song, no breeze, just the hush that wraps around you like a cloak when the world knows something is ending. The plague doctor walks ahead unchanged. You wonder if he feels it too, this quiet that's not absence but arrival. The land is flat now. the road drawn like a line across parchment. Ahead lies the city. You see it before you hear it. Gray stone, tall spires, walls, weathered by more than time. But the gate is open. The guards nod once as you pass, recognizing not your face, but the scent you carry: herbs, oils, ashes, courage. Inside the city breathes in whispers. Streets are half empty, flags hang limp, but here and there signs of stubborn life. A baker lighting his oven, a child skipping over chalk lines, a nurse walking quickly, head high, carrying a jar of something that smells like rosemary and vinegar. You're led to the infirmary, a large hall repurposed from what might have once been a school or church. Inside, rows of cots, some empty, some not. And in the center, a woman sitting beside a young man who barely stirs under linen. "He's my son," she says. "He was a builder. He hasn't spoken in days." You kneel beside her. Your satchel opens one last time. You take a moment. Look at what remains. Turmeric root, bay leaf bundle, cedar shavings, a scroll of lemon balm poems, a bitter vial of wormwood, a sachet of borage. You choose gently. First a tea lemon balm borage and a whisper of mint. You heat it slowly, letting the scent rise like breath. The woman helps you lift his head. He swallows. Doesn't choke. That's something. Then a cloth soaked in turmeric and vinegar laid across his chest. Bay leaves placed by the windowsill. A smear of cedar balm across his forehead. You even take out the pine resin, warm it between your palms before pressing it to his wrists. The plague doctor stands beside you now, and for the first time, he nods slowly. Approval, perhaps, closure, maybe, or simply acknowledgement that the work was done. You stay until night falls, the city glowing faintly outside with lantern light and exhausted hope. The woman holds your hand. Her son sleeps soundly. Later, as you prepare to leave, she presses something into your hand, a seed wrapped in linen. From his garden, she says. He grew feverfew for headaches, but he said it always smelled like safety. You tuck it into your satchel. It rests atop everything. And now, wind down. The road ends here for now. You stand at the edge of the city walls, the air finally still, your satchel full, and your hands stained with days of healing hope and herbs. The plague doctor does not speak. He doesn't need to. You lower yourself to sit beside him. The stones beneath you are warm from the day cooling slowly. Around you, the world continues quietly, gently, just as it always has. Somewhere, a child laughs. Somewhere, a window opens. Somewhere, a bundle of sage is lit, and smoke curls upward like a lullaby. Your breath slows. You feel it, the weight of the satchel now resting beside you, the ache in your shoulders, the soft scent of borage, and underneath it all, the hush of night settling over a world still hurting but still trying. Let yourself rest now. Let the images fade. Let the herbs slip back into the earth. You've done what you could, and that is enough. Good night, traveler. Sleep easy.